Hello and a warm welcome to Federal's special program, Capital Beat. Now, Modi government is facing a problem of plenty when it comes to goods and services tax. Now, GST collections have been so robust in the past few years that it has prompted the party to uh, discontinue the press releases which were issued on first of every month. Now, many people are saying that the high collections were breeding resentment amongst the people, and the public had started feeling that the government was collecting too much of tax. So, is this all about the perception of the government? Is the government trying to correct the perception, or are there some larger and bigger hidden reasons behind doing so? Because all of a sudden, the press releases, the gross collections of the GST, the figures which used to come out on the first of every month have been discontinued for the first time since the GST was introduced. Now, we'll discuss this and try and understand what the reason and what is the logic behind doing this. Joining me now is the renowned economist, Professor Santosh Mehrotra. So thank you so much for joining. We have Giri Prakash, who is the business editor of the Federal. Thank you so much. And we have Girish Joshi, senior journalist and political commentator. Thank you so much, Girish, for joining. Let me begin with Professor Santosh Mehrotra. Professor Santosh Mehrotra, do you see some kind of a design or do you see some kind of a cogent reason why government had to discontinue issuing the GST collection data?
Well, you ask a question which I'm confront. Similar questions I've been confronted with in respect of this government for for over half a decade. What am I to say? Honestly, this is exactly what you expect, which from a government which has never understood the meaning of the word accountability to the citizenry, let alone to parliament. If it doesn't understand its accountability to both parliament or citizenry, then this is what you get. Let me give you other examples of their attempts to uh, not release data. Take you back to the estimation of the GDP. I'll give you three examples. The estimation of the GDP itself. For years, we've been asking this government to release data from the Ministry of Corporate Affairs to tell us what is in the MCA database. Because if they tell us what is in the database, then we will begin to get a sense of how robust is their information about the organized sector. Let me give you a second example. A second example is that the periodic labor force survey of the NSSO was started in 2017-18. We've had an annual survey since then. Very good thing that we've had an annual survey. I was on the Economic Advisory Committee the Standing Committee on Economic Statistics of the NSSO for 3 years, appointed by the Secretary Mosby in 2019 for 2020, 21, 22. We kept saying to them, can you please do a pilot survey to assess how we can move ahead with an internationally compliant definition of employment, and what is employment, what is not employment. 100 countries of the world have adopted ILO compliant definitions. They have not they have still not done that pilot. Third example, the PLFS was done in the same way that all labor force surveys have been done in the past. We had leakages of the data prior to the results of the 2019 elections. And we knew that unemployment was at 45-year high. This government didn't release the data until a week after the 2019 election results came out. This, what you are telling me, is yet another example, and let me give you a fourth example, because it is extremely shocking. We all know how badly
But is the government, no, but Professor Santosh Mehrotra, I get the examples what you have given, but why is the government so reluctant? about GST specifically. I don't want to go into the unemployment data, but specifically about GST, it had
Pratatam,
brought about GST with all the fanfare.
you
It was releasing the GST collection figures like an event. But all of a sudden, what hit them? What struck them? That's what I'm wanting to
we'll
understand.
see. We'll see. I don't know if the GST collections have dropped because it's perfectly possible that the growth rate is nowhere close to what they are claiming it is. I think many of us have independently uh, said, including the former chief economist, that the growth rate is not what they are claiming it is. And I can give you reasons why that it is not the case. So it may well be that it may have dropped. That could be
Right.
one possible reason. Second possible reason, before the budget, they don't want to tell us, oh, what is the tax revenue total, because that will sort of enable us, people like me. I will be live a week from today on the budget on Times Now. It will enable us to know whether, in fact, the total tax revenue to GDP has risen or not. What is the basis on which the budget is estimated? Because how do you make estimations in the budget and put them out in the numbers? You do it first because you know what are the tax revenues, corporate, individual, as well as GST. Plus, you have make a guesstimate of what the GDP is going to be, right? That's how you arrive at estimates कि मैं इस लाइन आइटम में इतना allocate करूंगा, उस लाइन आइटम में इतना allocate करूंगा, क्योंकि हमारी revenues ये होंगी, तो हमको फिस्कल डेफिसिट भी कम करना है. तो देखिए बहुत से कारण हो सकते हैं. We are not entirely clear at this because the government's not telling us. And what I'm trying to say to you is that it is in the nature of this government to not remain accountable.
So, from what you're saying, Professor Mehrotra, I just want to recap it for the viewers. You've given us three reasons. One is that there is a possibility that the GST collections might have dropped. Second, that the growth rate is nowhere close to what they have claimed, so they don't want to show that. And third reason is that before the budget, they don't want to talk about the tax collection. That is the possibility. Now, let me come to Giri Prakash. I'll come back to you, Professor Mehrotra, again. Giri, what according to you is the reason that why they've suddenly discontinued this favored practice of the government of India? They were almost releasing the GST figures like a big event, and then tom-tomming it later through all the channels that look, this is what GST has done, and this is how it's bringing the revenue. But all of a sudden, without any information, they've discontinued the practice.
Yeah, thank you for this question. Let me come back with some, let me tell you about some figures for June 2024. GST revenue collection stood at around 1.74 lakh crore, which is around 8% over year-on-year growth. And then there is a breakdown of the June 2024 GST revenue collection, which is Central Goods and Services Tax, 39,586 crores. State Goods and Services Tax, rupees 33,548 crores. Now, one of the reasons why the government, this is something which has not been obviously been formally said, but what the government has been saying, what they have been telling off the record to reporters who cover the finance ministry is that there is a perception that the government is collecting too much tax, and this perception could wane on when the union budget is announced. And the government wants to go ahead and uh, stop that perception or avoid that perception. The government has apparently also said now from now onwards that they will only release the gross GST, not SGST or IGST, unless, of course, the states, want to release them. That is, or they want to disclose it. So these are the two reasons why this has happened. But there are other reasons why, as Dr. Mehta was talking about, that what exactly happens when the government decides to release only a single overall GST collection number each month and won't provide a detailed breakdown. For very obvious reasons, there's a lack of transparency by not sharing the detailed background, and it also about how the GST money is collected and distributed. So there are 4 or 5 reasons what could actually end up impacting several industries, several yeah, issues when it comes to not disclosing these figures.
All right. One more quick question to Professor Mehrotra, and then I'll come to Girish. Professor Mehrotra, now, how does it really impact the economy? Now, one, if you're not getting the exact figures of the GST, and there is also a feeling that the gross figures will only be released and not the state-wise data, and it has been left to the state governments whether they want to release that data or not. So, how is it really going to impact the economy when it comes to calculating the growth? When it comes to calculating the figures, coming out with data, how does it really impact the economy then?
See, Neelu, the government has the data. They're just not releasing it. So I don't think there's an issue about the estimates that they will make in the budget. What I fear is that on the 23rd evening or the 24th morning, when we are examining the fine print of the budget document, when people like us will be expected to write pieces, I'm already been committed without actually understanding what the tax revenues are, and GST has become a higher share of total tax revenue than corporate or income tax. This is thanks to this government.
Right.
To go into the reasons for that, I'm not going there. But we will be at a loss. We'll be in the dark. Now, this works to the government's advantage, doesn't necessarily work to analytical clarity for us. Because they know that their policies have been under massive attack, and which is the reason why their vote share dropped and their seats dropped. They know all this, and they they fear that all hell will break loose in Parliament. The budget session will be quite tumultuous, I guarantee you. It's not going to be that simple. So I mean, it's really unfortunate and tragic. It goes beyond this. Let me explain. The former chief economic advisor Arvind Subramaniam and I, we were recently at a seminar together, and we met, and I asked him, "Ki bhai, I want to access GST data as an economist. I'm saying by state, for the center, details. Which industry is paying, which are the ones which are paying more, others paying less, etc., etc. What is the size distribution of firms which are contributing? Is it small, medium, large? But you understand. That's the way economists' minds work. Now, point is, it's not publicly available. That data is not publicly available for the likes of me, which is very problematic in a highly informalized economy. Please try and appreciate this. 85% of enterprises in our fifth largest economy of the world are informal. They're not even registered, let alone be as part of GST. And which was going to be my other example in my previous intervention. They have just released, after a gap of 4 years, of data about the unorganized enterprises that they were sitting on the NSSO. They've just released it, and that's why I've been writing pieces about that, as of others. Because it exposes them, please try and understand, it exposes them that the employment in the unorganized sector has been damaged severely since GST, since demonetization, and since the lockdown. So it's all about कि बताना नहीं है, किसी तरीके से बताएं नहीं, बता देंगे तो ये लोग तो और पिल पड़ेंगे जी.
Right. So, which means it's very clear from what you and Giri are saying that the government is trying to hide something. They don't want to be transparent. Girish, how would you really read this situation of the government all of a sudden deciding not to release the GST figures? Now, are they fighting a battle of perception? They are already in the pits because of the kind of mandate which they have got. Now, on the economic front, also, they are hell bent on not being transparent. So, what is it really going to result in, according to you?
Nilu, primarily their whole program of controlling the economy has failed. And there, for last 9 years, they were able to hide anything and everything. Now the biggest issue is now if they give the figures, the chairman of accounts committee in parliament is a man who will now tell something and prove it on the floor. He has stood right in Corona, he has stood right in many of the things which he said anticipated. So the biggest fear now is that if they release some of the figures and he starts telling the people that see, this is going to go wrong, and that would be proved on the floor of the house, which they don't want. And problem is there. Till December 23, when your department detects 29,376 bogus firms taking the advantage of money, where is that money going? What is the action taken after that bogus companies which had been unearthed? Nothing. Because majority of the people who were caught were had the political connections which were they were immune. So the whole thing is hushed up now. 6 to 7 states just give 1 lakh plus revenue. Northeast does not give you anything. South, they are trying to push back. If you recently would have heard, Tamil Nadu has come up with a very good program of how to bring in investments. See, they are subsidizing the rents of the factory, manufacturing cost, the labor 1.2 lakhs on the labor that they are going to employ. So now if states start controlling, they wanted, and recently the biggest defeat was that when court said that the council's decision cannot be mandatory, they can go to the courts. What they really wanted that the council should be the final word because they were ruling most of the states. So they tried to complicate the things. Now suddenly the Pandora's box has opened up and they don't have the control over it. Now even if Chandrababu Naidu and Nitishan sitting with them doesn't mean that they would keep on supporting for all the things that they're going there. What is wrong on the paper. So they will try and hide. But how long can they do it? That is the biggest issue. And the budget, if they start releasing, and states can anytime release the figures what they have. They had smartly, even I think both the experts, if I'm wrong, they can correct me. They wanted petroleum products suddenly to come in because they totally wanted to control the money. But states were smart enough that they did not agree to that. Because you are not only the economists who are running the country, and you have totally failed on the economical side. And GST, tax terrorism. I was just listening to some March 2017 speech which PM Modi was giving during launching of GST. That after this system coming in, the tax terrorism will go, that Babu rule will go. Because previously they used to know the record, so they used to come and blackmail you. GST, everything will be transparent. It is the other way around now. So it's total collapse. How many SMEs have closed down just because of this? Every month. I had recently given you a case of Banaskantha where we went when there was election. Father and son, two uneducated guys, they are running an aluminium wholesale business. He's telling me two are doing it for almost like 20, 30 years now. But suddenly officer comes and tells, "Ye aapne becha tha, iska bill kidhar hai?" Now it's a small village, people coming. They anytime after we come and change the thing. So we normally make the final bill at the end of the month. So what I have to do ultimately is pay him something for getting released. This is terrorism.
Right.
So these all things together, and this is the main reason they are hiding it, that the cat will be out of the bag once they start releasing the figures.
Right. But Giri, I think you would be able to explain this better, and of course, Professor Mehrotra as well. That income tax is not paid by everyone. It is paid almost by everyone. Now, that bit also is there at the back of the mind of the government. And is the government trying to rework on some kind of economic indicators as far as the larger parameter of the budget is concerned? Are they working on something bigger? Maybe, I mean, of course, these are the reasons why they've discontinued the figures of the GST collection. But are there some broader reasons which are under the works, as far as the government is concerned?
Okay, first I'll take up this GST a bit. Let me sort of bring in some perspective to this. The government with much fanfare introduced GST, even though there was a lot of opposition to it. And then on a monthly basis, they had press conferences. Finance minister after finance minister went about talking about how it has grown and stuff like that. And there is a saying about you can fool some of the people some of the time. Now the situation is they are fooling people it has come to a situation where you cannot fool the people all the time. This all the time is playing out now. They can't fool. Now people have, now the politicians, economists are being far more critical about these kind of data and are questioning the government. Some of the politicians are doing it on the floor of the house, outside. The former chief economist Arun Subramanian is also doing the same thing. He's talking a lot about this. So that's one of the reasons why this is happening. There's something else I need to draw attention to. What does a GST do? It provides timely insights into consumption patterns, sectoral performance, overall economic activity. Without these granular data, businesses will have less, visibility into, say, for example, high frequency economic indicators that assesses the health of the economy. Now it is quite opaque, right? So therefore, it becomes that much more difficult for businesses to make informed decisions and plans accordingly. So you're hitting them where it hurts most. Now, what are the implications of it? Anyway, a lot of corporates are not, investing a lot. Now you bring in this as well. So, what happens to the investments? What happens to jobs? So, lot of whatever the government does, not much thought goes into it, and you can see a pattern. Overnight, things change. Overnight, the government decides to demonetize. Overnight, government decides to come up with shut down the country. Overnight, government decides not to release granular details about GST. So all these decisions are taken at I don't know at what whims and whose whims and fancies, but it just happens overnight. And this is very wrong for the economy. Any such decisions that you take have to be well thought out, and you can't do these things. Okay, coming back to a few other things that you talked about, let me tell you about how now. Well, the Mr. Arvind Subramanian, who is the former chief economic advisor, and an economist Josh Feldman, in some of their opinion pieces, talk about how the use of inappropriate indices will actually deflate certain sectors of the Indian economy. What they have said is that India is using wrong tools to measure the real size of some parts of the economy. They point out about the wholesale price index, which actually tracks the prices for manufacturing goods, and how they are being used to adjust the economic figures for service sectors like healthcare and education. Now, please understand there is a difference between manufacturing and from the service sector. What happens actually, and what are Mr. Subramanian and Mr. Feldman talking about? The WPI measures price changes for goods made in factories, using it to adjust the numbers of services which have different price trends. Very obvious, right? Gives a very misleading picture of how these services sectors are really growing. So what are you doing? uh, GSTU are suddenly decided not to release all the granular data. Suddenly you decide to do it as far as WP is concerned, and the government has said they are also tweaking certain parameters for other economic indicators. Has real thought gone into it? Have you had quite a lot of discussions behind it? I don't think so.
All right. So you've explained that well. That the overall picture looks like, and I'll come for the concluding comments to Professor Mehrotra and Girish Joshi now. Professor Mehrotra, over to you first. So government is not being transparent. It is reluctant. It is hiding. It's not using the right tools. It doesn't want to divulge all the details what it has in its bag. But yet, Prime Minister Modi says that we are dreaming of making India into the third largest economy. Now, with the GST being their, their biggest economic uh, uh, trophy, if I may call, it was almost like a trophy which the government presented. And now, if it is failing, so is it an admission? Now, really, not releasing the figures means that the manner in which the GST was brought, the way they are handling GST, the what all they have done to the states in the process, has it all resulted in a big failure? It's time to call it a failure now. Professor Mehrotra.
Um, I would hesitate to go that far so far just now. Let's not go that far. Having said that, you asked some important questions, and I think both my colleagues have done a wonderful job of explaining some of the issues. And I want to close by essentially re-emphasizing and underline some 3 or 4 of those. And they are actually very important because that will also serve by way of a summary. One of the points that was rightly and appropriately made about the GST in the way it has functioned, and it's not surprising that it has functioned like that because it was poorly designed and its computer systems were very underdeveloped when it was suddenly introduced, and the result of that has been that they had to introduce a whole series of notifications to inform and re-inform the all participants in the GST, which was itself a nightmare. This resulted in a non-transparent and a system where corruption has actually thrived under GST. One would have hoped that corruption would not have thrived. You've in fact seen corruption thriving. Today, a businessman, in order to get his GST refund, has to, no question about it, pay a bribe in order to get that refund. Because otherwise, especially for small and medium enterprises, their working capital is caught up. If they don't get that refund, how will they move forward? And of course, there are others who are doing the other things where, creating false accounts, shadow companies, shell companies, in order to be able to charge input tax credit. That's problem number one. Problem number two that was raised, and very appropriately so. Thank you for doing that. You see, we know that the GST gives us a sense of the consumption pattern. If the data was available, it gives us a sense of the consumption pattern. Now we know that consumption is, along with 3 other drivers of growth in the economy, an important driver because it accounts for some 58 to 59% of total GDP. Now, what has happened? Consumption has not actually been growing for the obvious reason that jobs have not grown. And as a result, household savings have tended to collapse, and they are lower as a proportion of GDP, which is impacting a growth, which is bound to be impacting growth. That was the second point. The third, another driver of growth is, of course, private investment. Now, the government thinks that, by putting in public investment through its collections of GST and others, it will offset the fact that in the 10 years of this government, the investment to GDP ratio has never exceeded 31%. Between 2004 and 14, when I was in the Planning Commission, between 4 and 14, the investment to GDP ratio never fell below 31%. It was between 31 and 38%. So, I'll give you an example of how important all this is for GST. If you look at GST on hybrids versus GST on electric vehicles, it's a very current debate. Hybrids have a GST rate of 43%. EVs have a GST rate of only 5%. Now, manufacturers have been put off investing in hybrids because of this very high GST rate, which raises the price and therefore reduces demand. It's good for EVs, but countries go through stages. They have to first adopt hybrids before they massively. EVs still today still have 1% of the market, while hybrids are excessively expensive. These are real life issues that industry is facing. And finally, I'm really glad that the WPI and CPI issue was raised, because that's what's affecting the estimate of GDP. And Arvind and Josh were rightly cited and appropriately cited, because one of the reasons why the GDP estimates are so non-believable is because there's such a a divergence, a wedge between the WPI and the CPI. Let me stop there.
All right. So you've explained that well. I'll come to Girish now for the concluding comments. So, what do you think is the design of the government? Very briefly, Girish, if I could ask you.
Nilu, as Mehrotra Saab just reminded, I just can tell you one thing that the whole program is being advised by some big industrialists. I can cite you only one case is the trucks, 28%. Now the single truck owner does not have opportunity for ITC. So the multinationals who had other many businesses, they keep on gathering GST from you. They don't have to pay, and they are literally creating a parallel black economy there. Does the government does not know that? We have told on many platforms, but there is no action. So the small truckers have vanished from the road. National policy for logistics, which is coming in, is ultimately going to benefit. So I think all policies they are coming are with to benefit some of few. That is what I can say.
All right, so we'll have to wait and watch, and maybe the government will try and come out with some explanation. But as of now, there is no public explanation in the public domain. There is no explanation from the government. But we'll have to wait and watch how the budget unfolds. Which the budget is on 23rd. Yes, Giri, you want to make a point?
Just a quick thing. The southern states have been talking about how they pay more taxes, end up getting less benefit. Maybe that's actually playing out. There are states ruled by the BJP where the tax collection is much lesser, and the government doesn't has come up with this. I mean, I'm suspecting that it may not be true, but the fact is it could be true as well. There could be states which are larger, and their tax collection has actually degrown, and whatever the states are talking about might actually southern states are talking about might actually be happening.
But
Although that
we'll be
data will have to be revealed to the GST Council, so the states will still ultimately know.
No, I know,
absolutely.
but then they're not making it public. So,
That's the point. I agree with you.
Yeah, so I feel that there is lots of what government is hiding, and until unless those figures are released, how would one come to know as to what kind of GST collection is there as far as states are concerned, as far as gross collections are concerned? Thank you so much, Professor Mehrotra, Girish Joshi, Giri Prakash. Thank you so much for joining. And one appeal to the viewers who are watching this discussion: subscribe to our channel, send us your feedback, and stay tuned to the Federal.